I have some very great experts with me, and we're going to tackle a very tough subject: parenting traumatized children that have experienced domestic abuse. And so today I have brought on some of the greatest experts I know: Dr. Debra Wingfield, who leads our advocacy course and wrote that and has had over 50 years of experience working in the field of domestic abuse. Nicole, Stania, who is a therapist, counselor, and an advocate, and also helps co-lead the advocacy course. Did I get all that correct, y'all?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll let y'all go ahead and say hello, say where you're from, and everybody else who's joining in, if you could leave in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see you. And if you're an advocate and recognize Debra and Nicole, please say hello and share your appreciation for them.
So I'm Dr. Debra Wingfield. I am currently in North Carolina, moved here from Colorado, and I have, as Lauren said, 50 years of experience working with abuse across the lifespan. And I am very privileged to be able to train the advocates for Call to Peace.
And I'm Nicole Stania, and I am from Pennsylvania. As Lauren said, I'm a counselor. I work primarily with victims of domestic violence, coercive control, and I really enjoy being a part of everything that Called to Peace has invited me to. And I don't have quite the experience that Deb does, but I'm learning from the best. I've been counseling for about 15 years, and in this field specifically for 3.
Yes, and we are so. Oh, is that me? Oh, sorry. I am echoing. I'm not sure why. Anyway, we are excited to have them here today and begin our conversation. We're going to have some really good wisdom nuggets shared today, so please tune in. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. If we have time at the end, we're happy to take them. If not, then we can tag them. They can come back later and watch it and answer the questions. So the first question of the day is, in your experience as advocates and counselors, what are some of the most significant impacts domestic abuse has on children, and how the mother parents her children? Loaded question.
So I'll go ahead and start. So we see multiple impacts on children socially, emotionally, physically, environmentally, being able to get along well with other children, being able to get along with their siblings. And then we see neurobiological impacts. Those are some of the physical impacts that you don't see directly, but you get the responses from the children as a result of those neurobiological impacts.
Yeah, I think spiritually you'll also see impacts where the kiddo is looking at mom and dad to take their cues about faith and God, and much like with a parent, you see the relationship between them and God often impacted in a way where it's almost severed a lot of times, or there's confused thinking about who God is and what he does, because fathers, and we deal with both women and men who have used coercive control, but the field we work in has a higher percentage of women who are being oppressed by men, and kids transfer that.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Dr. Wingfield?
I think we have to look at also the impacts on the children developmentally. So as we go through the different stages of their ages and their growth, we might see more acting out towards mother and doing the things to mother that they've seen their abusive father do, And then as they get older, then they may actually pull away from mother because of the influence of the abuser, or they may cling to mother and they might want mother right there to support them and protect them. And so we see those kinds of impacts. We also see acting out in the community where they're getting in trouble in school, they're getting in trouble with the juvenile justice system, and maybe experiencing use of alcohol, drugs, uh, getting involved in gangs, getting involved in illegal activities. So it runs the gamut. But if we look at the social problems that we have in our society,
Mm-hmm.
we can trace those right back to having experienced coercive control and domestic abuse.
Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking about the second part of your question, Lauren, about how it impacts parenting. And Deb mentioned the neurobiological impacts. And, a kid who's throwing anger fits, that can be highly correlated with fight. And when a kid's system is constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, it makes it difficult too when you're trying to be a safe parent and parenting well. So I think, being able to recognize that aggression or absconding might be flight, or when they're shutting down, that there's a whole neurobiological component behind there that as parents you've got to try to navigate. I am struggling with my own fight, flight, or freeze, and yet now I've got to be able to step out of that to help my kiddo. And I think another one too is just, every attempt that these parents are making, a mom is making, oftentimes is met with coercive control. So there tends to be mixed messages sent to kids, and attacks on, well, your mother is often one. So it parenting, it's very it's like untangling a ball of yarn to try to figure out how to step in and parent well. And the another way that I have often seen and just even dealt with this last week is, well, I'm concerned about the way the court's going to view my parenting. So there's like fine lines too that moms have to try to navigate, and it's difficult. And another one that was expressed to me this week was just simply, well, I wish he would just hit me because the court system's not going to understand, and they're not going to understand, and the kids are still going to have to visit dad, even though I won't be there to buffer the response. So those are just some that even just this week that have happened in my world and work.
And, and I want to capitalize on what you said about the family court, because I know a lot of the moms that are listening are going through family court, and it's really hard to understand that judges don't want to hear what's happened to her. They're only interested in how it's impacting the children. And that's one of the reasons why we have advocates, so that moms can work with their advocate and they can be heard and they can be validated. And our advocates provide tools and skills for moms to be able to navigate this system, because it's a very broken system. And mothers are held to a much higher level of parenting in the court system than fathers. So if father does something that mother thinks is terrible, and she takes that to the court, and they'll go, well, that's no big deal because he's a dad, and dads don't know as well as moms how to parent effectively. And that's one of the reasons why we encourage parents to take parenting classes and to really learn about how to parent traumatized children. And there are many methods that have been developed out there that are very helpful, especially working with the neurobiological issues that come up as well.
Wow. Yes, and our advocacy courses offer special spin-off courses that teach how to parent on traumatized children. So, for those who are interested, you can also jump into our advocacy courses and begin to take some of the side courses that we offer on the weekends and get help in understanding this, because there's a whole segment that talks about children and the impacts of this. So it's really helpful for women that have been through domestic abuse to be able to understand how it impacts their children on a deep level, and be able to understand these behaviors aren't because their child is reacting and being mean. It's because they're reacting out of their
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that I work with to be able to help moms is just
Mhm.
to recognize, like, this isn't about you, and helping her to learn to be able to calm herself enough to move away from it so that she can enter in and be present for the kiddo. Uh, yeah, and I
Mhm.
see that Kathy actually posted the traumatized parenting traumatized kids course.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks, Kathy. We appreciate that.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes. And so we'll go into our second question. What do children need most to heal from the effects of domestic abuse? And how can their mothers be part of that healing process?
Well, children actually need a well-educated, trauma-informed therapist to work with them. And that therapist must understand the dynamics of coercive control and how children experience that, just as mothers experience it. And that's one of the problems that we have, is finding those good therapists that
Yeah.
have actually been trained. And we do have some therapists that are going through our trainings because they want to do a better job and they want to be there for children. And then mom needs to be working on herself at the same time. Mom needs to do her own healing. And
Mhm.
as she heals, it helps the children. As she learns skills and tools, that helps the children. And one of the things that a lot of moms say is, well, I'm just going to do consequences and send them to their room, when actually a time out doesn't help these children so much as a time in. So
Mm,
it's a time to bring the children in, snuggle them, cuddle them, give them an opportunity to re-regulate their nervous system, because their nervous system is so dysregulated from all the confusion that they've heard and the mixed messages that come across.
Yeah, that's so good. That
I
is,
love
yeah, yeah. It's good because kids need the attunement from a parent for good attachment.
that. Hmm.
And not only the attunement, but they need to be read well and then responded to well. And fighting power with power, which is what often happens a lot with these kiddos, ends up escalating and destroying the safe relationship. So
Mhm.
yeah, you have to kind of be creative. Like, people are like, well, thinking out of a perspective that you have to change your perspective from why are you doing this to what do you need,
Mhm.
um, very much of the time. And they're not going to be able to exactly know what they need, but as parents, if we can change our perspective
Mhm.
from a punishment consequence oriented to helping the kiddos recognize what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and even exploring, how did that work for you last time, when you were upset with mom, and we both took time in.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. Both that just
Yeah,
both.
and it's important to ask a child, what happened to you, instead of what's wrong with you.
Yes.
So as we ask children what happened to them, then they have permission to talk. They have permission to say what is going on with them. And at the same time, we also need to be listening more to our children and validating their feelings, because when they're told they can't have their feelings or their feelings are wrong, that hurts them. Whereas if we say, you're entitled to any feeling that you have, how you're expressing it may be a problem, and we need to address a different way to express it. So again, going back to what Nicole was saying about what did you do the last time and what worked and what didn't work can be very helpful.
Yeah, and I like that too, Dr. Deborah, because the other thing too is we know in counseling, unless you have buy-in, the person's not going to change. It's just going to be us directing what we think is important. But we know that the ability to grow and to move towards wholeness means I have to be willing and able to explore and know. So me saying to a kid, here's what you need to do, rather than being a parent that says, let's talk about what your different options are, is so much more helpful.
Mm-hmm. And we do know that many of these children present in therapy with ADHD symptoms, when in actuality they're having anxiety or depression as a result of having experienced coercive control. So again, I go back to therapists and counselors need to understand these dynamics so they don't misdiagnose these children and then go running to the physician and saying, oh, we need to put this kid on medication, when they haven't really dug deep enough to find out what's happened to this child.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. I think just to briefly add, the other thing too is to be able to, as a parent, recognize that your environment, including your schedule, the way you handle, like on a day when a kid's coming back, like if you're a homeschool mama and you're thinking you're going to get homeschooling done, you might as well just bang your head against the wall 5 million times, because this kid is coming from an environment that is creating stress for them, and not just regular stress, oftentimes toxic stress. So when you're coming home, you need to be calculated and thinking, what does this child need at this moment to be able to just decompress and be able to join life in the next household. Yeah.
And I've seen moms do this very effectively with the kids take a shower, go to bed, or the kids take a shower, change their clothes, and then come sit down for a healthy meal. So that all of a sudden it's like we washed off what was and we come back to what is now.
Oh, I love that. And we were talking this week too with Sarah McDougall, and she was saying creative rituals very helpful for kids. And she's like, take them to a park as soon as you get them, or whether it's get a free sugar cookie and just let them get the movement out, kind of help them be able to process, swinging, running, jumping, all those type things before you take them back home. And that's, the responses are normal.
Yeah. Well, and what it does too, Lauren, is it reestablishes that connection. We know from the ACEs study that having positive influences, one positive person. So if mom's a safe person, or a coach, or somebody else from the community, which is important, like it's reestablishing that safe connection, which helps buffer any kind of like mitigating factors. So.
Yes. That's really good. I love that. And I hope every mom's encouraged, because I think it's so easy when your children are showing these behaviors to take that upon yourself. Especially when you've been through domestic violence, you tend to view everything as your fault anyway. So now you've got this child reacting and you think, oh, it's all me. It's just better mom. I'm not doing this right. But it's like you got to get outside of yourself and realize that this child's been traumatized as well. So it's learning how to help them heal. With the things that Debra and Nicole are sharing with us, is it's not you. It's you can be empowered to help them.
And we talk with moms a lot about building resilience skills, helping children to have their voice, helping children to maintain their voice. And even very young children, infants, pick up on all of the tension and the toxic stress in their environment. So when mothers say to me, oh, well, they were asleep when he was yelling at me, and I go, no, they weren't.
Mm-mm.
They might have been hiding under their covers or hiding under their bed or just covering up their ears, but they hear it. They see the aftermath. They experience it, and it does affect them. And we know the effects of trauma can be turned around. That's the good news,
Mm-hmm.
that it can be turned around. It can be different. It may take time. And this is not an overnight repair. This is something that takes as long as it takes. And every child is different. Every parent's different. So we really want to work in tandem to work with the advocates as well as the therapists to bring about the best outcome for these children.
Yeah, you just mentioned the word repair. So I guess piggybacking off from you, two things. What you were talking about is interoception. Kids by the age of 4 can read a room, and they just are able to, because of God's wonderful wiring of the way we're made, be able to do that. But secondly, repair. I know there's probably a lot of moms, if you're watching this, you're thinking, like, I've messed up. I've not, like, I've exploded. I've had bad days. Even without domestic violence, we aren't perfect parents. We have an example of a perfect parent, and that's what we're striving to move towards constantly with our kiddos. But the repair of rupture, Adam Young says, to be a good enough parent, there must be repair. It doesn't, obviously we're not going to be perfect parents, but there needs to be repair. I'm not sure of the exact percentage, and I'm not sure that it's out there, but there needs to be a significant amount of, not even significant, not even half the time, maybe like even a quarter of the time, just the repair of, hey, I handled that poorly. And the thing that that's doing too is setting up something different in your home than they're seeing in a home where there's minimized, denying, and blaming. And you're teaching them good resilience skills, good coping. And then I was thinking, as Deb was talking about, trauma destroys personhood. It takes away your voice, your dignity, and your worth. And I think that's the beauty of what a mama gets to do as a safe parent, or even a dad as a safe parent, if those situations as they present, is be able to allow them their voice. I love, they can be upset, but you get the chance to build the resilience to say, being upset's fine. It's how you present being upset.
Wow. I love that. Thank you. Thank you both. That is all of it's so good. Such good information. Thank you. And my next question is, what are practical ways a mother can adjust her parenting to help her children as they process through what they've experienced?
Yeah, I think Deb mentioned, the idea of consequences and punishment. When you live in a home like this, those kinds of things need to be adjusted. And it needs to be a more gentler approach that seeks to answer what is it that they need. And I'm sure Deb's going to add some more.
So this is a place where a parent can seek out parenting training, the PICT training, and I forgot what the PICT stands for. Parent interaction child training, I think is what it is. And then with kids who have social emotional issues and are dysregulated, the TBRI training is very good to work with the brain, work with the child with skills, and help them look at how they can do self-soothing, because many of these children didn't have self-soothing issues, or didn't have self-soothing training. So we have to give them a chance to self-soothe. We have to give them a way that is safe for them to self-soothe. And if they don't have a safe way, then help them figure out maybe something that's safe. So do they have a safe blanket? Do they have a safe cuddly toy? Do they have something that they can say, okay, I need 5 minutes with my toy, and I'm just going to sit here on the couch and I'm just going to talk to my stuffed animal. And instead of mom trying to intervene while they're trying to take care of themselves and do that self-soothing, mom needs to give them space and recognize as they get older what kind of help they need. As teens, teens need space, providing them with journals, providing them with a way to have peer interaction that's age appropriate. And really fostering those kinds of things can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, and I think even just along the lines with that, we're always looking to help them to be able to build any type of resilient skill. So one therapist that I follow and who is making dynamic changes in the biblical counseling movement, she referenced once in one of her talks about how she'll say to her kid, I'm dysregulated. I need a break. So, like modeling that stuff, a mama who's got a traumatized kid has to model that. They're not necessarily getting it. So, for her to model language, to model different skills, to provide, the outlets for them to be able to do that. And I think along with having the different kind of response to consequences and punishment and then the outlets, also when one caveat of the area is, how do I handle when they're coming home and saying this is what happened? And we really do want for the kiddo to have validation in that moment. It's a fine line because of the courts, but you can do it. You can help them. It is okay to normalize, wow, that sounds like you were really scared. Or to say, can you think of something else you could have done? Or to talk about what does healthy look like? What in relationships, honey, we should have freedom. You have the freedom to say no, and be able to do that. Those are some ways. And even just in the situations, providing outs as long as it's safe, especially if you're still in the same house with an abuser. Hey, I'm gonna go feed the cat. Do you want to come? When you know that there's been an issue going on with dad and kiddo. So those are some more
And
thoughts.
the one thing that I would caution mothers to be very careful about is asking questions, especially closed-ended questions that the kid asks answers yes or no to, versus asking an open-ended question. But more importantly, letting the children come to you, letting the children open up at their pace, because they may have been told, don't tell your mother what happened here. This is just between us. And what goes on here in dad's house doesn't get shared with mom at all. And dad is, in fact, abusing the children. But one of the things that we really know is that dad will use that power over the children to keep them silent. And even if they're acting out what's happened, or they're talking about what's happened, one of the things that we have to remember is to work with an advocate to determine if it's a safe time to actually reach out and ask for authorities to help. Because when we make premature allegations to Child Protective Services or Department of Human Services, one of the things that we find is mothers then get labeled as trying to draw that wedge between the children and the father. And it very often comes back on her, and she ends up being blamed because, again, these caseworkers don't understand that domestic abuse and coercive control is a power over situation. It's not between two people. It's one person exerting power over. And abusers, when they don't have access to mom, will use the kids to get access to her.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so important, and I feel like a lot of moms are concerned. Well, how do we go about that stuff? And there's another person I follow who very craftily, depending on the intellectual ability of your child, will say, "You are being a bully. How do you like it when you are treated in these ways?" And she takes the power and control wheel and uses those terms. And I think it does one of two things. One, it gives the kids language so they can connect what's happening in their other home. And two, it helps them build the ability for overcoming the things that they've seen, because they're learning about this in a way that's integrated in the home setting. And you wouldn't necessarily utilize all of the things that we know from the power and control wheel with kids who aren't in coercive controlled relationships. But I think it's a really good place to step in.
And I like to pair that with the equality wheel. So
Yes.
children learn, what are healthy relationships? What do they look like? How do we address that? And I want to thank you, Kathy, for putting up the link to that, because there's multiple wheels there. There's what happens when children are maltreated, what happens when we nurture children, what happens post-separation, because a lot of moms are told, well, oh, you're out of the abuse now, so we don't have to worry about that, when we know very well that there is post-separation abuse, and it does impact mom, it impacts the children, and it's minimized by the court system, it's minimized by court professionals. So again, an advocate can be very helpful in helping to tease out what to say to those court professionals and what to work through with your advocate or your therapist.
Yes. Thank you. And yes, thank you very much, Kathy, for dropping those links in. That was all of that information is so helpful for women. I know so many times they think, oh, you got out, everything's done. And it's like, no, understanding this continues, and it continues to affect children as well, and being armed and prepared for that. So it's not caught off guard of like, what's happening or why is it still going on? It's like you can learn how to work with it. So thank you for sharing all of that. And then my final question is, are there any additional questions you would like to add here to what we had just answered today? If anybody has any questions in the comments as well. I don't think I see any.
I mean, how much time do you have? Because I think Deb and I can talk about this all day long.
Let's see. I have time. I mean, do y'all want to go for a few more minutes? And if y'all maybe share, let's see, some of the most powerful things that you think would be most helpful for women knowing as they're parenting outside of post-separation. Maybe what is some things from your experience has been the most catches women off guard as far as parenting?
Let me start that off, because I had this scenario in my mind, and we know that abusers use the children even more once they don't have access to the mother. And simple things that an abuser thinks, oh, this is not a problem. But when you hand a child support check, or when you make a big deal about providing something to mom and then videotape it in front of the children so the children see you doing that action, those kinds of things are very damaging to children. Children should not be involved in knowing what's going on in the court. The only thing that children need to understand is, where am I going to be today and where am I going to be tomorrow? And who's parenting me today and who's parenting me tomorrow. And children should not be involved in anything that's going on in court. And we do have a lot of abusers that will sit their children down and go through every single line of every court order and explain it to the children. They'll tell their children, this is what mom said in court. This is what the judge said. This is what the evaluator said. Children should never be told those kinds of things. They're not prepared emotionally to handle that kind of information. And adult relationships are different from parent-child relationships.
Yes. Yes. And so many times the abusers try to take on the adult relationship with the children because now that is gone, that void, and so they're trying to fulfill that with the children as well. And that can be very damaging too.
Yeah, and I think even further, the kid is put in a place of triangulation where they have to decide who to align with, and it just sets them up for further harm when you do those things. And oftentimes in my setting, I'll hear, well, they came home and dad told them all of these things, and I feel like I need to correct them and tell them the truths. There's a way to go about that with giving age appropriate minimum detail without having to involve them in response that we talk about is, honey, those are mommy and daddy adult things to talk about. You are always welcome to ask me any question you want. And there'll come a time when you can ask even more questions as you get older and you can handle, what's happened. But right now, your job is to play. Your job is to do school. Your job is to learn how to love your friends and your family and take care of your animals and that kind of stuff. I think is really helpful. And I think it's important for moms to realize, or the safe parent to realize, sometimes that's a way of trying to get rid of the anxiety that the kid has. So you can move away from focusing on those things that they're trying to grab for to understand and control to make their world safer, to finding ways to help them feel safer and being able to decrease their anxiety. And that's another thing that we didn't talk about earlier, but whatever they're really good at, you're gonna like emphasize those things, not in a flattery kind of way, but hey, you know how to bake and you're such a good baker, would you like to bake a cake for this weekend? Or moving them towards the positive parts and helping them refocus without them realizing it, that you're helping them refocus on what it means to be a kid.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. So there is a question here. It says, what about abuser threatening the mom with further litigation each time child doesn't obey, conform to his demands, etc.? Deb, what would you say?
So what I would say to that is mom needs to understand that the courts are not going to get involved in parenting disputes. If there's disputes about parenting, very often they'll turn to a parenting coordinator and a decision maker who can actually make things worse. So I've seen very few situations where a parenting coordinator actually improved the situation. What I talk with moms about is there's parallel parenting. Mom parents in her house the way she wants to, dad parents in his house the way he wants to. And the one thing I have seen courts do is to say, you cannot carry over a consequence from one household to the other. If you're imposing a consequence on a child in your home, then you impose that in your home. But the court is not going to support you to have moms impose that in their home if that's what dad is doing. And it happens this vice versa. So moms, your consequences happen in your home. It doesn't carry over. And threats of litigation happen often. Having a good advocate to work through that with and to figure out how to manage that is very important.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you ladies would like to add?
I think this is a good place to stop. We could add all day, but
Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm just soaking everything in. I'm like hearing these questions and learning myself. This was so helpful. So if you're listening to this and you're I hope every advocate gets to see this and our support group leader. It just was really helpful so that you understand too, as you're working with women who are healing, how to direct and guide them through this process. And check out our advocacy courses as well. And yeah, once again, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we're still fundraising. So please donate if you feel led to. We're still going that until 10 more days left. So we're got a ways to go, but we're going to make it. We have all hope that God is going to provide, and we would love for you to be part of that.
Thanks so much, Lauren, for having us.
thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Well, if you're watching this later and you have comments, please leave them or questions, leave them in the comments below, and I can always tag Dr. Debra and she can come back and come answer them for you. So thank you for everybody tuning in today, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.